When we think about controlling something powerful, it's easy to assume it takes strength and the flow.
Alright, welcome back to my legendary build series. I'm on Threadrunner today, doing a solo flawless run at the Lightfall legendary campaign mission Headlong, which is the second to last mission in the campaign. It's actually a pretty fun mission when you beat it, but it can be quite annoying because it's the one where you fight the waves of Vex and the Vex network in that circular room that's closing with the red wall chasing you around in circles, and waves of Minotaurs, and then a Wyvern, and then the big Minotaur boss. His name is Ionion. Anyways, so yeah, that boss room could be a nightmare, but it's actually a pretty unique boss fight. It's kind of a shame that they didn't include that mission in the weekly rotation for the weekly variants with surges and champions and master difficulty, because that would have been pretty fun watching teams fall apart in that boss room and developing strategies to beat it, seeing what kind of cheeses they can come up with. It would have been pretty entertaining, but nonetheless, I'm doing the mission on legendary because that's all we got. And Threadrunner, I've been looking forward to doing this video more than a lot of them, because I've actually had a lot of fun with Strand Hunter this entire season. It's a great specifically with the Cyrtarachne, if that's how you pronounce it. I'm not 100% sure. The exotic helmet piece that you get at the end of the campaign, you can choose between that and I can't remember what the other exotic was, but it seemed like it was more of a PvP based exotic, certain weapon reloads or something like that. But the Cyrtarachne's helmet gives you woven mail every time you grapple, and I think it does something else too. I'll get to it, but the grapple part of it is what makes it so good with Threadrunner specifically, because Threadrunner, more than the other Strand subclasses, wants to be a grapple class. They have Widow's Silk, which gives hunters 2 grenade charges, and then it also specifically gives you a grapple point from your from your grapples. So anytime you do grapple, it'll leave a grapple point, so that you can infinitely grapple off of that grapple point. Well, it does have a cooldown, but as long as, or it expires in like 15-20 seconds or something, the grapple melee will just vanish. Sorry, not the grapple melee, the grapple point will just vanish. But during that time frame, you can as long as you have a grapple charge, you can unlimited you get unlimited grapples to it. Which means that you can, if you play it correctly, you can have unlimited woven mail, kind of in the same fashion that Titans with Abeyant Leaps have essentially unlimited woven mail because they have unlimited suspend. So this exotic helmet works very similarly, but it favors grapples. But nonetheless, Threadrunner is just, it's a very versatile subclass, for probably the most versatile out of all the Strand subclasses, because it has access to a lot of the key components to Strand that make it so good, like it has access to easy suspends, it has access to Sever through the melee, and then even Unravel if you're using a grapple. Because when you do use your grapple melee, it unravels the targets. And I feel like unraveling, there's not a whole lot of information out there on what exactly unraveling does. Similar to Sever. Like, we know Unravel is... It's all the little needles that are flying around all over the place after you kill something. They just unravel, and there's like a storm of needles like flying around them. That is the unraveling effect, and the way you apply it is a little bit odd, because once you unravel a target, they get debuffed with the unravel effect before they actually like unravel, and all the little needles come out and start doing tick damage to everything else in like an area of effect application. So it's a little bit weird, and even with unraveling rounds, I'm not exactly sure how that works. It's not like, it doesn't seem to work as potently or as obviously as something like volatile rounds, because the target has to be debuffed before it can, like, or it has to die, I think, before it becomes unraveled. But anyways, it's not, unraveling's not really the main focus of this build. It's more the grapple aspects, with the aspect Widow Silk, and just playing into grapples. So what else can we make our grapples do for us that is going to help balance out our gameplay and just make everything better? So we know we got 2 grapples. We have a free grapple point. Why don't we make those grapples reload our weapons for us while we're grappling? You can do that with Thread of Ascent, which is a fragment. So anytime you use your grenade, any type of grenade, you just automatically reload your weapons, and then you get a bonus to like airborne effectiveness and handling and all that stuff. But most importantly, you get free reloads, and with the potential for unlimited grapples, you can see where that comes in handy. And it's actually very useful for this build, well, for any hunter builds, because we're kind of giving up our marksman's dodge and our gambler's dodge currently with Strand Hunter. Like, yes, we do have access to both of those dodges, but we're forced to use the aspect Ensnaring Slam, right? So I'm willing to guess that most of us are consuming our dodge with Ensnaring Slam so that we can get suspends on enemies, right? So we're not really using our dodges traditionally, which means that we can't play into the, you know, unlimited free recharges of our melee per se, because we're giving up gambler's dodge, and likewise for the reloads, which I use a lot of the times on hunter builds, is I like to dodge to reload. And so because I'm using Ensnaring Slam and I don't want to waste my dodge for anything other than Suspend, because Suspend is just generally way more useful. Well, I get free reloads if I want, just from grappling. And then, you know, of course, like I said, we're getting Woven Mail every time we grapple. Also, you get basically unflinching from the Cyrtarachne's helmet as well. So when you grapple, you get your Woven Mail, and then you get unflinching aim, basically, for, you know, a certain amount of time. I don't know exactly how long. And then, but like you keep in mind that with Thread of Ascent, you get those reloads, you get handling, airborne effectiveness. The Cyrtarachne is giving you unflinching. So this is basically an exotic piece that plays into this subclass to make all of your weapon feels that much better. And it means that you could really capitalize on precision-based weapons like linears, snipers, bows, scout rifles, any ranged weapons. And because of your movement potential with the grapple, you can actually get to a really good position in a short amount of time, and then you can capitalize on the best weapons you have for playing that position. So I could definitely see where this would be extremely strong in something like PvP competitive game modes, where you're playing cover, you're playing evasion, you can just get into power positions and you can dominate with good weapon choices. So other than that, the aspects and fragments, well, I've gone over the aspects, but as far as fragments, there's 2 fragments in here that I'm using on every single Strand build because they're just too good. Thread of Generation and Thread of Continuity. Generation gives you grenade energy just for damaging enemies, and it gives you a lot of grenade energy. I think it's even getting nerfed next season because it's the way it seems to function right now mechanically is it gives you grenade energy based on tick damage, like instances of damage. So a high fire rate weapon or a tick damage weapon or something like a trace rifle, you can almost exploit Thread of Generation if you're playing into, like, you know, high fire rate and tick damage and just have unlimited grenades. So I could see where a nerf or an adjustment is needed there. Maybe it should be more proportional to the amount of damage that you're outputting instead of like instances of damage, even if that damage is minuscule, right? So like a 900. What's going on here? Oh, I thought my video stopped, but no, I'm loading into the most annoying part of this mission. That's what it is. Anyways, yeah, so you could use like a 900 RPM funnel web that's not going to be doing a lot of damage compared to like a rocket launcher, but you're just going to get way more grenades from that funnel web because it's every single damage instance. And so the other fragment is Thread of Continuity that I always use pretty much because it just extends the amount of time that targets are suspended for by like 50%. It also extends the amount of time that targets are severed for and unraveled. And I am using all of those Strand characteristics in this run. Obviously, I'm using Suspend. In this case, I'm using Suspend as more of a failsafe. Like, this isn't a Suspend build. Like, my goal isn't to just suspend everything and do crowd control. This is more of a movement-based weapon damage, in and out type of build. So I'm using Ensnaring Slam tactically when I need it, if I get pushed by enemies, or I will use it after I grapple melee into a group of ads. It's just a good strategy. If there's a wave of ads, you grapple into them, you maybe get off a kill, and then just immediately slam, and you're going to suspend whatever's left, and that keeps you safe because you are taking a risk. Even with Woven Mail, you're taking a risk going in for a grapple melee. So I always just pretty much follow up with the slam. Yeah, and the slam actually, while I'm on that train of thought, the suspend is good. Like I know that you could do and I've done it, the 6 Coyote build where you get 2 dodges and 2 grenades. So you just go with 2 shackle grenades from Widow's Silk and 2 dodges from 6 Coyote, and you could just be suspending everything left and right. It's kind of crazy, but you don't get the Woven Mail, and the gameplay is a little bit more risky, and it's not as fluid as like a Bant Leaps on Berserker. But even without doing that build, like the Ensnaring Slam, that is a good cooldown for being able to suspend something. Because if you look at the cooldown rate for a shackle grenade, it's like 2 minutes and 45 seconds or something like that. Threat of generation kind of makes that a non-factor, but nonetheless, if you actually had to wait that long for a shackle grenade, compare that to Ensnaring Slam on Hunter, and it's basically like a dodge cooldown, and you get to suspend something. And I don't even need to use Thread of Mind to get my dodge back faster, because it just comes back fast anyway. It's a dodge. Other aspects I'm using, Thread of Ascent, like I said, for the grapple reloads and weapon feels. And then the fourth and final fragment that I'm using in this run, I'm using Thread of Binding, which just basically amplifies my super, so that anything I kill with my super, it'll emit a suspending blast. So it just makes my super better. But honestly, I just like the fact that it gave me plus 10 resilience, and I was able to use it. And that way I was able to keep my plus 10 mobility and my tier 10 mobility, tier 10 resilience. Which, by the way, Thread of Ascent also gives you plus 10 mobility. So along with those grapple reloads and just playing into the Hunter build, it gives you more mobility. So yeah, even better for Hunters. But Binding's not necessary. There's other good options that you could use for the fourth fragment, and out of those I'd probably suggest Propagation, so that when you do your grapple melee and kill something, you're going to get unraveling rounds on your Strand weapons, which is kind of cool, but it can be a little bit redundant, because when you do your grapple melee, you're already unraveling whatever you just hit with your grapple melee. So it could be a little bit redundant to have unraveling rounds after the fact, because I don't think you get them for very long. It might be like 5 seconds or something like that. So you have to be quick to follow up with your unraveling rounds if you're going to use that fragment. You could also use Thread of Warding, just to give yourself that much more Woven Mail every time you pick up an Orb of Power. And by the way, producing Orbs of Power is very easy on this subclass, because Heavy-Handed, one single combat mod for 3 energy on your arm piece, is going to produce an orb every time you grapple melee enemies and kill them. It's also going to give you an orb every time you just use your little string melee, whatever it's called, that severs targets that you got to catch. Yeah, so whether you're using your charged melee or your grenade melee, you're going to be producing an orb of power just from Heavy-Handed. So it means that you can easily pick up orbs you know, on top of running siphon mods for your weapons, so you can produce a lot of orbs regardless. So Threat of Warding would be good, but it is a -10 resilience penalty. And then Threat of Isolation would also be very good, and that's what I had originally on this build, so that when I do precision damage to targets, they get severed, right? And that way I don't have to rely on my melee to sever targets, because severed targets do less damage to me, which is basically a form of damage resistance. Combine that with Woven Mail, and you could see how those would stack pretty nicely. And then other than that, I'm not a huge fan of the melee, because I find catching your melee is never practical, at least on controller. And then the damage, it's weaker than Arcane Needle, and you get 3 of those on Warlock. It's got bad range. So like Frenzied Blade, if you're going to use a Sever ability on a melee, Titans is just better, because you can just use Frenzied Blade. And you get 3 charges on that too, and it does more damage. So I think they just need to give it more range, give it more damage, make it automatic to catch the thing or something like that. But other than that, you know, I'm using Quicksilver, Koraxis' Distress. I could say a lot more about those. Quicksilver's been buffed. It's Strand, it does tangles, it does grenades. Koraxis is going to be good when I have it fully crafted, but I'll go into it more at another time. Anyways, hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Catch up in the comments. Take care.